It was really challenging. It was so painful. It was, I lost trust in my body. I lost trust in God. My faith struggled because, as we tried for 5 years, it just the longer we tried, the harder it got. So I thought, oh, this was our moment. Like, this is why we had to go through infertility. This is how I was going to get my twins. And then I was 11 weeks pregnant, and the baby B, the heart rate started to go down. We knew the heart rate was trending down.
Yeah.
They told us the baby wasn't going to make it. We were worried that maybe we might lose Indy as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
so that's so hard to listen. I'm listening and my heart is just beating like this. I can't imagine. I mean, how you went through this and you can share this story. I mean, this is really impressive.
Like, I can tell you with 100% conviction that Indy was the best thing to ever happen to my life.
The Avenue of the Strongest is a podcast dedicated to exploring the lives and experiences of the most inspiring individuals from around the world. Each episode features interviews with fascinating guests who share their insights and wisdom on a variety of topics, including education, impact, motivation, health, and learning. I'm your host, Ania Chowdhury.
And Vlad Suleiman.
Joining us today is Terah Belle, a mother of three who has gone through a challenging journey of infertility, Down syndrome, cancer, bone marrow transplant, and the process of healing. Terah's daughter, Indy Llew, born with Down syndrome, captured the hearts of people worldwide with her infectious joy and unwavering courage in the face of adversity. Although Indy was diagnosed with leukemia, she fought tirelessly and served as a beacon of hope for others during the global pandemic. Despite the heartbreak and challenges, Terah found hope and inspiration in her daughter's legacy, sharing her story to help others going through similar struggles. Through her powerful storytelling, Terah continues to keep Indy's memory alive and the lessons of love and resilience that Indy taught us all. Today, Terah is here to share her journey with us. Welcome, Terah. It is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here sharing our story and sharing about Indy Llew and what she taught all of us.
Of course, and we are equally, if not far greater, humbled to have you on our show. This podcast is sponsored by ArgoPrep, an award-winning edtech company serving over 1 million students nationwide. We understand that as parents, you want to ensure that your child receives the best education possible. Say hello to ArgoPrep. With over 15 plus educational awards earned in just the past year, ArgoPrep's platform offers your child video lessons, quizzes, drills, printable worksheets, and more. Best of all, your ArgoPrep subscription comes included with 4 comprehensive digital workbooks that cover all 4 subjects: math, ELA, science, and social studies. Visit argoprep.com today and start your free trial. It's crazy because you've gone through a lot of things. It's a lot of things, but your story is so powerful because it helps so many different people. So I kind of want to take things back first, and I want to take you back to when you got married and your husband Brian, you were trying to have a baby. Talk to us about the experience with infertility because people go through that. Some people or a lot of people don't share about that. I'd love to learn about that journey and experience of that first. It took several years, like 5 years, right? So I would love to learn more
Correct.
about that if you can share that with us.
Okay, it did. It took 5 years for us to get Indy here. Um, and that was my first, like the dark night of the soul is what I call it, where you're in just a really heavy, dark, painful space. But the dark night of the soul is what leads you to your soul's gold. And I feel like um, that is kind of the message of our whole experience, starting with infertility. It was really challenging. It was so painful. It was, I lost trust in my body. I lost trust in God. My faith struggled because, as we tried for 5 years, it just the longer we tried, the harder it got.
Hmm.
It was challenging on our relationship as a couple, the highs and the lows. Ultimately, I would say the first 3 years were really challenging on our marriage, and then the last 2 years of infertility really brought us closer together. And I think that was a beautiful time of growth and learning and connection for my husband and I. Um, and as we struggled so much to bring Indy here, when we finally got pregnant, it was the most fulfilling, beautiful, rewarding gift. And I think I treasured pregnancy and parenthood. I've treasured all
Even
of those
more.
things more because of how hard it was for us to start our family. Um, but it was challenging, and we went through a lot. We ended up doing in vitro fertilization to get Indy, and I had, a miscarriage, and then we had a failed in vitro where we transferred two of our embryos and it didn't work. And then our second in vitro, we got pregnant with Indy, and we actually had Indy and a twin. So we had two babies in there, and we were so excited because my whole life I've dreamed of having twins. And so I thought, oh, this was our moment. Like, this is why we had to go through infertility. This is how
Yeah.
I was going to get my twins. And then I was 11 weeks pregnant, and the baby B, the heart rate started to go down. We had lots of ultrasounds because we did IVF, and they do, serial ultrasounds in the beginning, and the heart rate started to go down, and we felt so helpless because there was nothing we could do to save this little baby that was inside of me. It was We knew the heart rate was trending down.
Yeah.
They told us the baby wasn't going to make it, and we were devastated, and it felt like such a big loss. And um, we were worried that maybe we might lose Indy as well.
Mm.
I started hemorrhaging after I lost that first baby, and luckily Indy held on. She's our little miracle baby all around in so many ways, but she held on through all of it. And then after that point, I continued through the pregnancy. It was a very healthy pregnancy.
Mm.
We were so happy. It was just such a joyful time in our lives, preparing to welcome
Mm.
our first little girl. Um, and that's the
Yeah.
summary of infertility.
uh,
Yeah.
so, uh, s- so you mentioned around 11 weeks, or baby B's heartbeat was trending downward, so they weren't going to make it. Forgive me for asking, but did you? So, do you have to get a procedure done to, or it's just supposed to naturally come out? I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, that's a really good question. The baby, when you have twins, normally when you have a miscarriage, you pass everything. But when you have twins, if one of the babies is still alive, your body just naturally absorbs everything. So
Oh, oh wow. Okay.
very interesting. Yeah. So there's no procedure. There was no passage of the baby. Like, it just all gets reabsorbed. And isn't that
Wow.
fascinating?
Wow.
Oh wow.
So, yeah.
That's wow. That is actually really incredible. I need to look that up.
Yeah.
Um, I was also thinking about this, which is, let's talk about it. Must have been really expensive, right? Going through 5 years of
Yeah.
infertility, all these Oh, that's like another big topic, right? It's like, okay, well, you struggle, and that's just not like emotional struggle and mental struggle. It's also it's really it's a financial, it's a big financial commitment. Is that correct?
Yes. It was a very big financial commitment. And, we tried everything we could to avoid in vitro, and having it be, I mean, now it was 7.5 years ago that we were going through that process. And there wasn't, it's much more common today. And so I think there's probably more help for people who need to go through it. But
Mm.
it was very financially straining. And so we had to save up for it.
Yeah.
It was a lot. I think we call Indy our $1 million baby. Um, every penny completely worth it, but
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
amount the amount we had to pay to get her here, and then so many more hospital stays after that. So
Yeah.
it was a lot, and we've been so blessed to be able to pay for it, and we received a lot of donations. It it just, it was a lot. But
If you can give some advice to f- to parents struggling with infertility or women struggling with infertility, what can that be? Since now you've kind of you went through that 5 years experience. Looking back, is there something you can tell parents that are experiencing infertility who are frustrated?
yeah, when you were asking that question, the first thing that came to my mind um, was a connection to yourself and to your God, whoever that is for you. I feel like once, as we were on the journey of infertility, once both of us reached a place of surrender and also to ourselves, to each other, to God, um, that's when things really changed for me. The place of surrender was I might not bear my own children, and I have to be okay with that. If that's the story of my life, if that's how it's going
Mm.
to be, I with that. And so reaching peace inside of no matter where this leads, I will be okay and my
Mm.
life will still be good. That's when things really changed. And I feel like once I reached a, a spiritual a spiritual growth and development where I was able to spend time with myself every day, meditating, loving my body again because it was hard. I began to hate myself not being able to get pregnant because I
Mm.
thought this is like my one
Yeah.
is to be able to bear children and I can't get pregnant and as a little bit of a background, health is so important to me. I'm a nurse practitioner and I've been in functional medicine, holistic medicine. Like I try so hard to be healthy. And so it made it even harder for me where I'm like the healthiest person I know and
Yeah.
I still can't get pregnant.
Yeah.
But once I put all that aside and all the anger resentment towards my body and just loved myself and spent time meditating and really honoring my body for where it was at and what it was doing for me despite not getting pregnant. I got pregnant with Indy and her twin 3 months later. And
Wow.
I feel like it was just, we still did in vitro, but I feel like it was the spiritual growth that got us to where we needed to be, that got us
Mm.
ready for having Indy because it was a wild journey from the moment she was born.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
so
No.
that's so hard to listen. I'm listening and my heart is just beating boo, 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 like this. I can't imagine. I mean, how you went through this and you can share this story. I mean, this is really impressive.
Yeah, it
Thank
no,
you.
it really is. What were your initial thoughts and emotions when you found out? Or I'm not exactly sure of the whole story, but when did you find out that Indy had Down syndrome or was diagnosed with Down syndrome? And how did you and your husband take this? Because it's an important story to share because so many other families go through this, right? But it's like
Yeah.
it's such a hush hush topic. People don't talk about it, and that's why
Yeah.
it's so important to talk about it. So I just wanted to hear about that aspect of that journey.
Yes, and I'm really grateful to you guys for bringing awareness to this because it was very difficult our experience in the hospital when they found out Indy had Down syndrome. And I want that to change. I don't want other parents to ever go through what we went through. So I'm really happy to be talking about this. So we found out Indy had Down syndrome shortly after she was born. We declined the prenatal testing
Mm,
for Down
okay.
syndrome and other birth defects because we were like, we're young, we did in vitro, they put in healthy looking embryos, and if it was showing a risk of Down syndrome or trisomy 18 or these other things they test for, back then, the procedure that they would have done was an amniocentesis, and that can be fatal to the baby.
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
we were like, well, if it comes back questionable, I wouldn't do the amniocentesis because I wouldn't want to harm her. So we just thought like we're not going to do the testing. Um, and actually, I'm really glad. I'm glad that we found out when she was born, because I
Mm.
was able to really just love my pregnancy and not be
Yeah.
scared and not be fearful, just really be all in with that pregnancy with her. So we found out she was born. It was a crazy birth experience, and after she was born, we were doing skin to skin, and I was nursing her, and the pediatrician came in to do their evaluation, and they took her over to the corner, and then they said, we're going to take her to the nursery for a bit to check her oxygen. And I was like, why? But I was so kind of out of it from just giving birth. I was like, okay, well, Brian, go with her. Don't leave her side, because
Hmm.
I didn't want Indy to leave the room.
Yeah.
The plan was for her to never go to the nursery, but he went with her, and they were doing some screening tests. And 45 minutes later, they walked back to the room, um, and this pediatrician said, I need to speak to Brian and Terah alone. And so my mom and my doula and the nurses that were in the room, they all, and we were terrified. They didn't bring Indy back. They left Indy in the nursery and back with that. And I was certain that they were going to tell me that she died.
Yeah.
It was just like she comes back empty-handed. It was really solemn, telling everyone else in the room to leave, and like she was about to deliver horrible news. And so, uh, hearts are racing. I'm just prepared for them to tell us the worst. And she said, so we think Indy has Down syndrome. And we were just like, what? It was shocking for sure. It it was at that moment, it's hard for me to take myself back to that space because we've gone through so much harder things now.
Hmm. Right.
That it's like a flicker of grief compared to what I've
Yeah.
experienced since. But it was very devastating to us at the time, just because it's not something that you expect,
Yeah.
and we didn't have any close relationships with anybody who had Down syndrome or had children with Down
Mm.
syndrome. And um, I worked as a nurse in the ER for 8 years, and what I knew of Down syndrome was health problems, because those are the
Yeah.
kids that I
Yeah.
treated often. And so I was scared. I was really scared that she was going to have a lot of health problems, and um, scared of what people would think. I was scared of what our life would look like. Brian and I loved to travel and adventure
Mm.
and
Yeah.
do all these things, and so we were scared that we wouldn't be able to do those things
Mm.
anymore, and that our we didn't really know what to expect, but we expected the worst, and um, I feel like in that moment, if they would have come back to the room and put Indy in our arms, it would have went completely different, because there became such a big disconnect, because I was like, wait, that's not the baby I just had. Like, I that's not the baby I just carried for 9 months. Like, I thought I knew Indy from carrying her, and then when they tell you something like, oh, she has Down syndrome, I was like, no, that doesn't feel like the baby I was just carrying. So it just felt a really big disconnect. And
So,
I think if
talk
the if hmm?
talk about bad bedside manner from doctors. I
Yeah,
mean, what the
yeah,
hell? I mean, seriously, that could have been. It's exactly what you said. I mean, you're not going to bring your child back to the room, and you're telling people to exit, and it's so serious.
yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah,
serious, but it's not. It's not that serious. It's not a death sentence. It's ridiculous. So
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
we need to send this to doctors to go take a crash course on bedside manners. It's
yeah.
another topic for another day.
Yeah.
Um,
We'll go find the doctor and we'll send this interview to him.
Yeah. Yeah, actually for a while that was my purpose until cancer came along, and then I got distracted doing other things. But I, you know, what we've learned since is what a gift she is and was in our lives, and what a gift Down syndrome has been in our lives. I look back and I feel remorse and I feel guilt for the way that I felt when I found out she had Down syndrome. And I know that it was natural for me to
yeah,
feel those
yeah,
things. And so I try to give myself grace in that. But to Like I can tell you with 100% conviction that Indy was the best thing to ever happen to my life. Um, and be Indy if she didn't have Down syndrome. And Down syndrome made her so joyful and happy and just the funnest little person to be around. And if she didn't have Down syndrome, she wouldn't have captured the hearts of hundreds of thousands of people across the world during her short little life. Like Down syndrome made Indy who she was. And um, as we've grown into the Down syndrome community, that's what we see in our friends. Like their child with Down syndrome is the light and the joy of their families. It's absolutely nothing to be sad about, nothing to be scared about. It's it was so just wholesome and sweet having Indy every day in our lives. So that's my main message about that. I don't want parents to be sad or scared,
Yeah.
just happy. So
No, in your post when we've been preparing for the interview, I saw something that you shared, that you had a motherly intuition that something was wrong with Indy when she was still young.
mhm.
So could you please share what were some of the early indications or signs that led you to suspect that there might be more going on with the Indy Lew's health?
Yeah, so when Indy was 3 months old, I noticed some petechiae on her face. And petechiae, they're little broken blood vessels underneath the skin, and they look like little purple dots. And it can be a sign of low platelets in your blood, so one of your blood building cells. And so I took her into the doctor. She was developing great and she seemed healthy and vibrant, but I just noticed these things on her face. So we took her in and we tried getting labs and they were unable to obtain labs. They poked her several times and the pediatrician just said, well, kids with Down syndrome often have differences in their blood. So we'll just chalk it up to that. Like she's vibrant, she's healthy. I think she's fine. And then I started noticing again at 9 months more of those petechiae. And it's just something that kind of was up and down for us with that. And kids with Down syndrome do have kind of lowered immune defenses. And so when they kind of get sick more, they can get sick more. And when they get sick, they tend to get more sick than a typical child who has a healthy immune system. So we noticed, Indy didn't get sick a lot, but when she got sick, it was hard on her. It was really
Yeah.
hard on her. Um, and then, things continued. Like we were still just in this state of bliss with Indy. It was so much fun, and she was developing so well, learning to walk. She walked with this adorable purple walker, and she was just so fun and really doing so well with her milestones. Like she blew us away because we didn't know what to expect with Down syndrome, and
Right.
she just she showed us she proved us wrong in every way. And then when Indy was 16 months old, she that's when I really noticed something is wrong here. She stopped wanting to be as physically active. I mean, she would just like run all over her cute little walker. But she stopped wanting to be as physically active. She stopped climbing the stairs. She didn't want to walk as much. She just was kind of tired and fussy, and fussiness was like not normal for Indy at all. And then she started getting sick with colds, and she got RSV, and then an ear infection, and then croup, and then another cold, and just these, all in a row, these sicknesses. And our pediatrician was like, this has just been a really rough winter. Why don't you guys leave Utah? And so we planned a trip to Hawaii so we could get some fresh air and sunshine and hopefully get Indy feeling better. But while we were in Hawaii, she just got worse. And one morning we woke up in Hawaii and she had a fever and she had petechiae like on her arms and her face. And I just sat there looking at her and I said to my husband, I was like, she has leukemia. And she was pale. And he said, no, she doesn't have leukemia. Like, you've seen too much as a nurse, you're freaking yourself out. And I'm like, okay, I hope she doesn't. But in my heart, it was like I've seen the signs and I know the signs, and I've taken care of kids with leukemia, and Indy has leukemia. So we traveled back home from Hawaii, and we got home early in the morning and called her pediatrician, and she sent us in to get blood drawn. And she called us back a few hours later with the results, and she didn't say a whole lot. She just said Indy's blood levels are very low. She needs a blood transfusion. We should admit you guys to the hospital. They're waiting for you up at Primary Children's Hospital. And and so, okay, we went to the hospital. We checked in. They didn't tell us where we were going, but she just said, okay, you're going to go to room 436 on the fourth floor. And I was like, okay, the fourth floor. I used to work at that hospital as a nurse. And so I'm like, what's on the fourth floor? And there's a couple units there. I was hoping we weren't going to the cancer unit. But we got up there, and sure enough, we were being admitted to the cancer transplant unit. And it was, again, we were in this twilight zone of just like, is this real life? How is this happening? How are we here? And since I'd been on that unit so many times before, taking cancer kids to their rooms, um, it was very surreal for me. Like, now I'm a parent walking onto this unit with my precious little girl, and it was terrifying. Of course, we still had hope that maybe it wasn't really cancer. Maybe it was some other weird thing going on with blood, which can happen in kids with Down syndrome. They kept telling us that this could just be a virus. This could just be something going on with her bone marrow that's not normal, but could be normal for a child with Down syndrome. So she got some blood transfusions and a bone marrow biopsy the next day, and they came back and said her bone marrow biopsy did not show cancer. And so we were like, whoa, we just escaped this very dark potential diagnosis, and they sent us home and said, we're going to send this biopsy in for further testing. It'll take a couple of weeks. And so we went home, and we worked really hard to try to get Indy better and healthy. And she started to improve in her energy and just kind of gaining weight again and stuff, recovering from those sicknesses. But they called us 2 weeks later and said the results of that bone marrow biopsy came back and showed cancer. It was myelodysplastic syndrome, which is a pre-leukemia, and it's more common in kids with Down syndrome, but they treat it like AML. And so it's treated like AML is kind of a more, not more aggressive, but it's treated more aggressively than ALL. They're just two different types of leukemia, but they were going to treat Indy aggressively. So, deep breaths, but that was the start of our cancer journey.
And
I don't know how much you want me to go into that, but
I mean, that's crazy. That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
Whew. I know. Okay, let me go back to my state of mind here.
yeah.
What motivated you to share this story with thousands and hundreds of thousands of people?
So that kind of fell in our laps, and this was nothing I ever really tried to do or intended on doing. When Indy was, this is where it started. When Indy was 6 months old, I met a very inspiring woman who had a child with Down syndrome, and she has written a book. Her name is Kelly Hampton, and she became like a teacher to me. She's written a book, and she had shared her daughter's birth story, finding out that she had Down syndrome when she was born. And I did the same. I thought this was beautiful. This helped me so much to read her birth story. I'm going to share my birth story. And so I created a blog, and I wrote the story of Indy's birth, and I shared it on my social media, which I had a small account at that time, a couple thousand followers who just thought Indy was cute. Well, my birth story kind of went viral overnight, and my account just blew up from that on Instagram and Facebook, and a lot of people read her birth story, and that's how it started. So people started following our story from then on. It wasn't really like I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, whoa. I had never really been into social media before, and so this was a whole new journey for us. But I feel like now looking back, it was it was divinely orchestrated for me to share that story. And now I can look back and see how many people that Indy has touched and continues to touch, even in her passing. And it's incredible and beautiful to me because I had no idea what I was doing, like to create a blog, or I don't even know how I did that still. So um, I guess being motivated to continue to share after she was diagnosed with cancer was because so many people already loved her, and so many people were cheering for her and praying for us. And really, it became such a strong support system to us to have all of these people around the world showing us love, support, praying for us. It became a really beautiful thing. And there were definitely times where I wanted to crawl in a hole and shut everyone and everything out, um, and just try to survive the hardship of what I was feeling inside with Indy fighting cancer. There's times I still feel like that now, where I feel such like an ache of grief, where it is hard to let people in, and it's hard to continue to share sometimes. And sometimes I just want to turn it all off and try to pretend like this isn't what happened to my life. But um, I've seen and I've witnessed too much beauty in sharing, to not share. I feel like Indy
You know,
wants us to continue to share.
you know, we are we most people, including me, including Vlad, we're all so caught up in our lives. Well, by lives I mean we're also caught up in working and doing this and doing that, and we a lot of us always forget about the most basic things, which is relationships and love. How many
Mhm.
people don't have the time or don't take the time to call their moms? It's an
Yeah.
astounding number, just because they think they're busy, while they have their parents alive in this world. They still love their parents, they have a healthy relationship, but we're so busy. And I want I let I mean people need to be reminded that this is what life is about. It's about love, and this is stories like this puts you right back into your place and shows you that, hey, maybe you need to reprioritize stuff, right? Maybe you need to spend more time with your kids. It's not all about X, Y, and Z and all achieving all these outside goals, because most people, when they achieve these goals, what they're lacking on is spending time with their family and loved ones.
Yeah.
But I do want to talk about your faith. So throughout this journey, and I don't know any other explanation for getting through a journey like this other than faith. So I'd love to talk more about that, a little bit more about that. So how did faith play a role in helping you and your family cope with all the ups and downs? I just imagine that is that's the only answer, right? Like, you can't
Yeah.
scientifically just sit here and just there's no explanation. But I just wanted to hear more about how faith played a role in this whole process.
Yeah. Um I really feel like faith was all we had at some point in this journey. Um because to face reality was
Yeah.
um too painful. Um it still feels that way sometimes. And not only painful, but just there was no hope with, certain times in the journey when things looked so grim for Indy's life and um, for her prognosis. Really, all we had was faith, and our greatest faith lied in Indy getting better. We had so much hope and faith that Indy would get better, um, and but then you also have to have faith that if Indy doesn't physically heal, that we're still going to be okay, and that life can still be good, and that God still loves us, and having something bigger, because sometimes life is so painfully hard. You have to look above it. You have to look beyond it and have faith in something greater than yourself and something greater than what is physically in front of us. Um, that's sometimes, and we
Yeah.
learned that over and over in the journey. Um, was to, and I learned this through infertility too. And one of my favorite quotes is, "And if the answer is no, God is still good." And that was a big part of my infertility journey. Like, if the answer is no, that I'm not going to bear my own children, God is still good. And then when Indy got sick, if the answer is no, that Indy's not physically heal in this life, God is still good. Um, and I just think the answer is going to be no for us. And we all are going to go through what I call the dark night of the soul, where things are painfully difficult and hard and impossible to face. And that's where you need faith, because otherwise you have nothing.
Yeah.
And our faith wavered. My faith did waver a few times throughout the journey. And after Indy relapsed, she relapsed 10 months after she had gone into remission, and she was doing so well. After that first relapse of hers, I lost my faith completely. I was so devastated, and I didn't pray for 6 months, and I was angry, and I felt so betrayed by God and all the things. And then I realized that not praying and not letting God into my life, and that I was missing out on a certain amount of peace that I could be
Yeah.
given by looking outside of my current circumstances. Um, so once I went through that, that was the darkest time for me in my faith journey. And it's gone up and down a little bit, with Indy's passing and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But ultimately, I feel like, right now, my faith is stronger than ever, because I've seen the way that divinity has shown up for us in our lives, through multiple relapses, through Indy's ultimate, passage from this life to the next. And I still see her all the time, and she shows up for us in very beautiful ways, and we see signs from her, and we feel her. And if I didn't have faith, I would be missing out on all of those hellos from Indy and that connection that we can still have with her while she's on the other side.
Yeah.
You spoke about how you woke up one day after you posted the video, so this video became viral. So I would like to speak about the your social followers and their support. And I know your daughter became a viral sensation thanks to the Indy Effect and known as a finger crossed gesture while she was
Yeah.
fighting during a relapse. So
Hmm.
my question is, how did you and your family react to the overwhelming support and attention you received from thousands of people around the world?
Um, that was beautifully overwhelming. And, things, I posted a video of Indy crossing her fingers. Well, it's something that she had done prior to her relapse, when she was learning to walk, or when she'd get nervous, she'd cross her fingers and like, "Oh, please let me be okay." It was the cutest thing. And so on a really hard day, she was in the ICU on life support for a month. And on a really hard day in the ICU, we looked over at her, and she was asleep. She was sedated and breathing tubes, and she was crossing her fingers. And I posted that on my stories, and it just, as you said, it went viral, and it took off, and it was the most, it makes me emotional. It was the most beautiful um, empowering thing that I have witnessed in my life, where all of a sudden, people from all around the world are sending us pictures of their crossed fingers, and big classes of people, gymnastics teams, cheerleading teams, um, teams from our local colleges and high schools here in Utah and around the world, and cheerleading squads. It was so beautiful. We'd get all these pictures of people crossing their fingers, and it was really unbelievable to see the amount of people who were aware of Indy and aware of what she was going through at that time in our story, and to receive this incredible amount of love. It really carried us through extremely dark times, through the rest of that ICU stay where she was on life support. And after she got off life support, they told us that, well, her lungs have healed now, but the cancer came back and she has 6 weeks to live. And it was crushing to us, as you can imagine. And in short, we took her home. We decided not to do any more treatments and to just love on her and really take care of her holistically and see what happened. They said she had 6 weeks. Well, then we saw this incredible miracle where Indy, instead of getting sicker in those 6 weeks, she started getting better. And it was nothing that we could, it's nothing that you could explain. It was an absolute miracle. And there were people all around the world praying for her through that time, and we were asking for prayers. It was so beautiful. And so those 6 weeks, she starts getting better. They were drawing her blood every week, and we just said, we don't want to know the results. Like, we just want to enjoy this time with Indy. We don't want to know if things are getting worse. We just want to be present with her. Well, they didn't tell us any results. And then I think it was 2 months later. So they told us she had 6 weeks. At about the 9 week mark, where Indy's like up and walking around and she looks good and she's doing great. It was the day after Easter in 2020. Her bone marrow transplant doctor called us and said, I know you don't want to know any lab results, but you'd want to know these ones because there are 0 cancer cells in Indy's blood. And leukemia is a cancer of the blood. And so
Yeah.
her cancer cells were going like this, and then all of a sudden they started going back down to 0. And it was an absolute miracle. And they said, we have no medical explanation for this. We've never seen anything like this. And I think it gave hope to so many people. And that is what they call the Indy Effect. The Indy Effect is hope. The Indy Effect is to fight like Indy. She was so brave and happy and joyful and strong. And throughout the entire journey, which was very difficult on her physically, she remained positive and happy and joyful. And yeah, when the crossed fingers and the Indy Effect is still just one of the most beautiful parts of our story. And she continued through that year, because we all know 2020 was a scary, difficult year for everybody around the world. And Indy became this beacon of hope for people during that next year, where there was this absolute miracle that nobody could explain medically. And then Indy became this little person that people would go watch on social media every day when they couldn't leave their homes. They were worried about what was happening. People, were sick. And then there was Indy, and she was just this little, like, bright light and such a happy person and so entertaining. She's so fun to watch.
Is there a story? I imagine you get so many messages and stories for over the years of how Indy has inspired them or helped them. Can you share one story with us? Any story of your choosing, how Indy's story either inspired someone or got someone through their grieving process, whatever it is? I know you have probably so many of them, but I'd
Yeah.
love to just hear one from like someone else reaching out to you and telling you their story.
Yeah, let me like the most impactful one. We have received thousands of stories, but the one that has always stuck out to me so profoundly was a message I got from a 16-year-old girl, teenage girl, and she explained to me how she had been very depressed, and suicidal, and she was planning to take her life. And in the moment, as she was planning to do that, she said Indy's face came to her mind and stopped her from doing that. And she said that it was something that she knew she couldn't do. If Indy can fight through all that she has fought through with smiles and joy and being positive, then she could fight through her battles too and be okay. And that one has always stuck out to me, because there are many more like that. Um, that one is, she was very honest and upfront with me, but I've received so many other messages of like people telling me that Indy pulled them out of their darkest, lowest state and their time. And other
Wow.
messages where, someone's fighting for their life in the hospital, really sick, and they got through it because every day they saw Indy's face and thought, if Indy can fight through what she's fought through, I can fight through this. People who message me and swear that they're still here today because of Indy.
That's
And it's really
beautiful.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very beautiful.
Yeah.
I know that you're working on some book, so I would like to learn more
Some book.
about this book
Some book.
and what it will be about.
Yeah, so I started this book writing last year, and then I got pregnant, and it became very emotional for me to try and write all of this down. So I took a break from it for a few months. I've picked it back up again just recently. Um, but the book, in essence, will be sharing our story, but I want the focus for me to be on, um, like the joy and the light and the miracles of the story, because there's a lot of hardship here, right? And it
Yeah.
could be heavy, but I want to focus on the joyful, light, fun parts of the story. I will share the whole story, um, but I want it to really represent Indy, and that's the way that she lived. It was, you would have never looked at her and known all that she was physically enduring, because she remained so vibrant and joyful. I want to really focus on that, and then the miracles. Like we lived miracles that even when I look back, I lived them. Even when I look back and remember what we lived through, it's like, how did that really happen? How did it really happen?
Mm,
Like it
yeah.
it is so otherworldly. There's no explanation, and I would like to share more of those stories because I think a lot of people are lacking hope, and I think that Indy's story, our story, is a story of hope. And that might sound strange because Indy died from cancer. It's still hard for me to even say that and acknowledge that that's really what happened to our life story. But I think the hope that remains is because we know that Indy is still here, in a spiritual sense, and we continue to get messages from people all around the world who say Indy showed up for them on a hard day. And it's incredible to me, that Indy can be a spiritual peace and a spiritual comfort and a spiritual guide to people still all around the world. And they send me pictures of and butterflies and 1111 on the clock, which is, Indy's special number. And it it's beautiful that she still continues to have this reach worldwide, and it's still the Indy Effect. Like she's still a beacon of hope, even though, physically she did not conquer cancer. And I think, she completed what she came here to do in this lifetime, and she was ready to go.
I'm
Talk.
sure
Um,
this book will inspire millions and millions of people. And as you said, people need hope. And
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm sure this
Yeah.
book will give a lot of hope to people who going through the same, and they'll receive the extra power, extra motivation from your words.
yeah. My husband Brian is also writing a book, so it'll be interesting to see like
The,
our
oh, that's
our
that
differences.
that's a really good idea, by the way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you shouldn't see the final product of either one, because
Yes.
that would be a fantastic book.
Yeah.
That would be that's actually
It,
sounds
it,
that's
it should
something
be
that I
it
would
should
want to
be
read.
two-sided book,
Yeah.
her
Yeah,
opinion and his
right,
opinion.
right.
That's what
Like
he said to do. That's one of our ideas.
honestly, that is a brilliant idea. That is a
Yeah.
brilliant idea. And now you have to do that. No, I'm
Yeah,
serious.
yeah. Like
Because
the
it's true.
mom's perspective and the
Yeah,
dad's perspective. And there
Exactly.
aren't a lot of men, I feel like, who have written about like a journey like this that's filled with grief and hardship, you know. So I
a
think it'll be
hundred,
good to have this. Yeah.
1000%. I cannot wait
Yeah.
to see that. I cannot wait to read that. That sounds very exciting. Talking
Yeah.
about excitement,
Yeah.
congratulations. I know you gave birth recently, right, to your son.
Yes.
So congratulations.
Thank
Uh,
you.
your the video that you shared on Instagram was incredible. I know you posted
Thank
like I
you.
think it was like a 2 or 3 minute clip. I don't know if you saw it, but it was like a profession, like super professional. Like everything was about it was perfect. So you did a home birth.
Thank you.
What?
Yeah.
How was that experience? Talk us through that. Obviously, we don't really have that much experience, and talking about you just said that you don't typically see men talk about grief. Typically, men I just this is out of our element, but
Yeah.
this is why we need to be here, because typically when I imagine this conversation, it's with another, it's a girl that's interviewing you. So
Yeah.
we felt awkward but necessary, like
Yeah.
very important. And us
I'm,
being uncomfortable makes us so happy, because it we know we're doing something right. We should be
it means you're
uncomfortable.
growing.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly,
You should
exactly.
be pushing yourself to be uncomfortable.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
But what was the home birth experience like?
Oh, it's the best. And so I had my second daughter at home as well. So that this was my second home birth. And what motivated me to have a home birth was the difficult experience we had in the hospital after Indy was born. And so with my second daughter, we decided to do a home birth, but it was the most beautiful, spiritual, uh, incredible experience. Um, just having your baby at home, and it's beautiful. And this time was a lot different than when we had our second daughter, because we've experienced immense heartbreak since that time. So welcoming a baby into the world has been emotions, some very difficult emotions, and then the most beautiful emotions, as there are when you welcome a baby to your family. But that birth was redemptive and also painful, because emotionally painful because um, I wanted Indy to be there to
Yeah.
welcome her brother. I still live every day with so much grief. Um, and some days it's very hard. And that beautiful laboring and birthing experience um, was difficult because Indy wasn't there physically, but beautiful because Indy was there spiritually, and
Mm.
I felt her lovingly beside me and helping me and guiding the process, and like feeling her, like guiding her brother into our family. And in that way, it was so beautiful, and in that way, it was so difficult too. Um, but yeah, I could talk so much about this. It's an incredible experience. Just bringing a child to the world in general, but at home and under these circumstances, and the space where our hearts have been, there was so much hope in his life and in this like renewal of our family.
Hmm.
He's brought so much
Yeah.
joy back into our family, where we wake up and there's this adorable smiling happy baby. It makes the day not so heavy. It makes the day lighter and happier. And, he's brought so much joy to our other little daughter, Birdie. Seeing her be a sister again and having a sibling
Yeah.
again has been so fulfilling to our hearts and so good for her. It's just been a gift. He has been a gift.
Well, Tara, I have one last question from
Yeah.
my side. Um, it's going to be a question for all the men. So I will let you in on, I guess, a secret. I haven't even told my parents yet. Only my very close people know. But my wife is pregnant. I'm telling you this before my parents, but this is not going to go live until I tell my parents
Good.
anyway.
Good.
Of course, but I wanted to share that. But
Aw.
I wanted to share that because I wanted to ask you, what can men do to support their, when their wives are pregnant? I really want to
Yeah.
ask. I really want to ask that. So please
Okay.
don't hold back and say.
Okay. Well, first of all, congratulations.
Thank
That's
you
so
very much.
exciting. And when you and your wife go through the process of bringing your baby earthside, you will remember this conversation and you'll remember and understand how beautiful and incredible that experience is. This is going to be like a monumental event in your life.
Mm,
I'm so excited for you guys. Um, so to show up as a husband for your wife during pregnancy and birth, um, be emotionally present before anything else. Um, Hearing what she has to say because she's going to be experiencing a lot of changes in her body and in her emotions with all of the hormones. So just be present and be a good listening ear, and then support physically as you can. So, um, when she's exhausted, because you are very tired when you're growing life inside of
yeah.
you, um, rub her feet, or when she's nauseous, ask what you can do to, what can you get her to help her nausea? Just be very attentive and present. But I would say that emotional presence is the biggest thing for me. Like having someone that I can talk to and that I can trust um, to cry with, and to express the emotions and the excitements and the fears and all of those things. But I think some of the biggest moments for me that I can remember from this last pregnancy were, it can be a little awkward when you have a growing body and you're growing out of your clothes and you feel a little bit maybe chubby. I just remember Brian making comments to me about how beautiful I looked,
Mm,
and like, just he loved my body, and rubbing me and just like being really supportive of in every way. Like, you look gorgeous, and I would wake up some days just feeling awful, and he's like, but you still look beautiful. Or
yeah.
and then being present for me, like at during that last trimester, especially when she's going to be feeling exhausted and you have a big weight that you're carrying,
Yeah.
and your bones and your muscles are aching. Like, just simply rubbing my feet was like, oh, he loves me so much. It means so much.
That's very good advice. Very
I
Yeah.
think
good
we I
advice.
think we need to deliver this message to all men in the world so they can hear it,
Yeah.
because I think there is, I mean,
That's true, though. Yeah.
only I think
Yeah.
like 20 or 30% of men really doing this kind of support to their wives when they're
Yeah.
pregnant. And I think we will never
Yeah.
understand how you are changing, how body is changing, how mind is changing, how everything is changing for you. That is why, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Well, you guys will do great at it. And I don't know if you
Yeah.
noticed in the birth video, like how Brian was very attentive and present during
Yeah.
the labor and stuff. It's it can be such a beautiful experience to have your partner just be right there and rubbing your shoulders, handing you water, just being
Yeah.
present.
Okay, one last question from my side. So I
Yeah.
think it's already clear that India is one of the strongest and most inspiring people, and a story that is truly inspiring. So, what would you say is the most significant lesson that you have learned from India's journey, and how would you like to inspire our listeners with it?
Um, I've learned so many things. I would say that the number one message would be hope, which we've kind of spoken of throughout this interview. Um, because, like I said, sometimes when life is so difficult, we don't have a lot of hope. There can't, sometimes in the journey with Indy where things appeared so grim, I didn't know what to have hope in. And one of my favorite affirmations that we would put up on the wall, Indy had a bracelet that said it, it's hope is the conduit for miracles. And I still repeat that often today because a miracle could be that we're able to go through the process of losing our daughter to cancer and then still lead a positive, fulfilling, happy life. And that's the new miracle for our family. For a long time, the miracle was that Indy was still here and she was beating all the odds and um, that she was this miracle. Our miracle is different now. And even the miracle of her passing and the beautiful things that happened in her transition from a physical state to a spiritual state, um, there were miracles in that as well. So I think that the messages of hope and joy, because Indy did everything with joy, and because she was so joyful, it helped us to be joyful too. And um, you might you might be able to imagine how hard it is to know that maybe your child is going to pass away or that they have cancer and they could pass away, to know that they won't always be with you. We had very heavy emotions, but we were able to live with joy and positivity because Indy taught us how to do that. And that's what she needed from us. And even still in her passing, that's what we strive to do. And we're not perfect at it, and we have really hard, sad days. But we try to live with positivity and hope and joy. We try to dance and be joyful for our other children and sing and still go on adventures and do all the things that we did when Indy was here, and because that's what she would want us to do. And I think that's the message. Live with hope, live with
Mm.
joy, because we aren't promised tomorrow.
Yeah.
We don't know how long we will be here. As you mentioned earlier, so many of us are so busy doing our own things that we can't even call our mother. Um, well, we don't know how long we have here. And I
Yeah.
think Indy taught us to be present. And no matter the hardship that you're going through, no matter how busy you are, take time for joyful moments. Take time for your people and take time to nourish your relationships. Um, Call your mother. Spend time with your
Yeah.
children and be present. And I'm grateful for that lesson that Indy taught me to really be present with my children. Slow down.
Yeah. I love
Yeah.
that. That's such good advice. Slow down for all the New York City people or from New York City. So people don't
Yeah.
know what slow down means. Tara, thank you so much
Yeah.
for being here with us today. I can't believe an hour has passed. I just looked at the recording time, and I'm a little bit shocked because your story is so captivating. It's so captivating that time just kind of froze, and I'm looking at the clock and I see that it's literally over an hour, and that's wow. So
Thank you.
uh, thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you so much for sharing your story to the world. I cannot wait to read your book, and I want to read it in that format of I need to see
Okay.
Brian's side of things. I think that is a fantastic idea, a absolutely
Yeah.
fantastic idea. For our listeners, you can always follow Terah on Instagram, which is at Terah Belle. That's TerahBelle, where she shares a lot of her experiences and insight. And keep an eye for her upcoming book.
Yes.
So, Terah, thank you so much for being with us today. It means a lot.
Oh, thank you guys. It's been an honor. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share our story. So thank you for having us.